My aim was just to show them the wines and wait for their reaction. But then I thought, they've never tasted California wines before. They'll know California is on the west coast of America, somewhere north of Mexico. And they would think of it in terms of southern Spain or southern Italy. It wouldn't get the reaction, even with the best will in the world. I wasn't certain to get the objective reaction I was after. So that made me think of putting in the Bordeaux wines and the Burgundy wines and doing it blind.
Everything was in preparation. And it was at that time that the really, in a lot of ways, the crucial thing happened. Patricia gave me a list of the wines and the tasting order of them. I was the only one in the room who had them.
I announced the results of the whites before we sat down for the reds. That didn't cause too much concern because the next set was going to be Cabernet Sauvignon against the top wines of Bordeaux. They didn't know what the wines I'd put in, but Bordeaux is the great flagship of France. And so I think the tasters viewed that with interest. They said, yeah, that's a surprise, gosh, or mon Dieu. No one expected a wine from California, a Cabernet from California, to beat Mouton Rothschild, Haut-Brion, Le Velasquez, and Montrose. No one in the room, with the possible exception of Oded Khan, realized what the reaction was going to be, what the long-term effect was going to be.
If a journalist had not been there that day, and it didn't have to be me, it could have been anybody, the story would have been covered up, the French would have denied it. You had to have a journalist there that day for the record. I did not have any idea that it was going to be such a seminal moment in American history.
My introduction to wine was through my grandfather, who had quite a good cellar. One evening sticks in my mind. It was Christmas Eve, probably 54. When dinner came to an end, he said, I think you're old enough to have a glass of port. And so he had the butler pour me out a glass of port, and I tasted it, and it was absolutely fantastic. So I said, gosh, Grandpa, that's wonderful. What is it? Coburn's 1908, my boy. And that was a flash, and I already knew that that was going to be my profession. I taste maybe 50, 60 wines a day. I'm enjoying the week. I'll certainly taste over 200 wines. Out of those 200 wines, I might select 3 or 4 to write about in a decanter. So the next 3 wines are from the Vega Sicilia estate, which is bang in the middle, in the best part of Ribeiro del Duero, and they're all 100% Tempranillo grape.
He's always been good. He's a natural. I think you've got to be born with a good sense of smell, but it's practice. You've got to taste and taste and taste and make notes.
That's lovely. I love the freshness and the crunch. It's richly textured. And you can only get that rich texture, that complexity of textures from long maturation. This wine is approaching a work of art where the painter has been working on the canvas brushstroke by brushstroke to create a wine like that. Very complex. When you have a complex wine, you can't just get the bouquet right away. You have to keep on smelling it so that all the aromas impose themselves on your brain. I can go to a week's tastings and not find a wine that I really want to write about, because I've only got 6 wines a month to write about. But I found 2 here. Great range of wines.
As I understand it, he started in wine back in the 60s and moved to Paris. He was an English-speaking figure in the Paris wine industry, which is obviously quite a rare thing, but he had an amazing shop over there called Cave de la Madeleine, and then next door he founded a wine school called Académie du Vin.
Which was absolutely unheard of, an Englishman opening a wine school in Paris. to teach the French about wine. You know. And that, of course, made me well known overnight. The wine school, that's when I had my moustache, my Robert Redford moustache. And that's my wine shop. You know, everyone wanted to talk about us. We were the flavour of the month. My wine school was bang in the middle of Paris, and we were the only wine shop that spoke English. So California winemakers used to come to my shop bringing their wines, and I thought they were fabulous. And well, there was prohibition in America in the 1930s, so the California wineries only got back on their feet in the 1940s, and they were a young industry. They were, historically, they were over 100 years old, but people had forgotten about them. And so these guys were making the best wine they possibly could, banging on doors to try and sell their wine, and finding it wasn't easy. You know, I thought, well, why don't I do something about it? Why don't I try and get these wines recognized? And the only way to get unknown wines recognized is to have them tasted blind against the benchmark wines. And so that's what I did.
The Judgment of Paris was a tasting which Steven organised, which pitted the best white wines from Burgundy and the best red wines from Bordeaux against pretenders to the throne from California in both colours.
We invited the judges because by that time I was very well known, and I invited the 9 best palates in France. Everyone was very happy to come and taste California wine because they'd never tasted it before.
And when he put this tasting together, he expected the French wines would win. It was not even the guy who organised it could have sort of conceived of what would go on to happen.
We had 10 wines in each category. I'd have been happy with a second and a fourth, or even a third and a fifth. I would not have been happy if my California wines had all come in the bottom 5. As it was, I got a first in both categories. The 9 finest palates in France voted California wines top, and that was a huge scandal. Huge scandal. It's now an open game. An unknown wine can become known by going up against the benchmarks. Warren Winiarski, who's the owner of Stag's Leap Wine Cellars, whose Cabernet Sauvignon beat Mouton Rothschild and Aubryon, the following day, when the news came out, his telephone rang off the hook. East Coast people who wanted to buy his wine. And subsequently, 8 years ago, he sold his winery for $185 million. For the French, it was the first chip in the wall of French supremacy. But also, it was a kick in the pants because they'd been resting on their laurels. And 5 or 10 years afterwards, everyone was saying, Steven, you know, that was a brilliant thing you did, the Judgment of Paris, because it really woke us up. Okay, one of the reasons we bought this house, personally for me, is the wine cellar. You've got to watch your head as you go down. The stairs are very steep. I got about 3,500 bottles of wine down here. This is all Bordeaux. This is all what the English refer to as claret. The oldest bottle I have is a 1978 Chateau Hauteville, Saint-Julien. The rule of thumb with wine is if you buy a case, because most wines are sold in cases of 12, you'll drink the first 3 bottles before they're ready. If you're lucky, you'll drink the next 6 bottles at their peak, say a 10-year peak. And then you might drink the last 3 bottles on the decline. Even if it's past its best, it's always got something. Because I buy all these wines to drink, there's no investment. I don't like paying more than, say, £50 a bottle, which is already quite a lot from most people's point of view. You know, this is an investment in pleasure. It's something that one shares. Wine is all about sharing. So that's Bride Valley. This was our very first vintage. It was picked on 2 weeks after my 70th birthday, and we only made 490 bottles, and we've sold it all. I got 2 left. But anyway, it's English sparkling wine. This is mostly Chardonnay. In the vineyard we have 55% Chardonnay, 25% Pinot Noir and 20% Pinot Meunier. Those are all the classic champagne grapes. This is Chardonnay, part of the original planting in 2009. Very, very good vineyard, facing west. Up there is Pinot Meunier, Pinot Noir, also 2009. So that bit and this bit were our first plantings. In '87, I saw there was a lot of chalk, even on the surface. So I took a little block of chalk back to Paris where I worked and showed it to a friend of mine who was working with me. And I said, "Where do you think that's from?" And he said, "Well, Champagne, of course." I said, "No, it's not. It's from Dorset." He said, "Well, you should plant a vineyard." And so that's really where the idea started. Up by the vineyards, past the sheep, you can see that line of chalk. And you can see we only have that much topsoil and the rest is chalk. This is why we really like Champagne. Pretty good. Comparing this, the first vintage we made, 11, it's much bigger, which is good to a certain point because it's more robust, but also you need to retain that freshness, and that has a freshness now. Very good. Having been in the wine trade all my life, for me it's a culmination. I've kind of completed the circle, having begun by being a wine merchant, selling wine, and a wine taster. This is an area of wine that I'd never thought of going into. If I can produce a wine which my colleagues on the wine writing side and on the wine retailing side enjoy and will appreciate and buy, then I've succeeded. Equally importantly, if I can produce a wine which I like, then I succeeded. I think it's going to emerge as a better vintage than we all thought in the En Primeur tastings. And I think that comes down to the great skill of Bordeaux winemakers, because they have the money now, and they have the money because they've been making good wine over all these years. And they invest their money into the vineyards and into the winemaking process. And tasting around today, there are of course no bad wines. There are some wines which might be better, but most of the wines really were a little higher than my expectations. And I think there'll be very, very good wines to drink over the next 2011, 2012 to 2017, 2015, 2020. It's a very useful vintage.
And were there any communes that stood out?
Well, I've just been doing the Medoc and the Northern Grave. I think it's chateaus that stand out. It's the Langres Barton stood out, Les Poiffret, Les Barton, Durfort Vivants, Pierrot Lechine has certainly come up. It's chateaus that stand out. I think in a difficult vintage, it's the chateaus that stand out rather than the communes. In great vintages, it's the communes that stand out.
But tell us about the movie. You were played by Chris Pine in Bottle Shock, who was also Captain Kirk.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. Captain Kirk, that was good. And Jack Ryan, all my heroes from when I was a young guy. The movie, when they said they were going to make the movie, it was after the book had come out, the 30th anniversary, and they said they're going to make a film, and we said, well, it's at the library, the documentary has been done. I said, no, we're going to make a love story to California Napa Valley wine, and it's going to be based around the story of Chateau Montelena. And I said, well, everybody knows what happens. And they said, yeah, well, so the Miracle on Ice, what happens too. So they made the movie, and it's been a really good thing for the California Napa Valley wine business. And I think they followed through on their promise. So it's really not a documentary of what happened, but it is a fanciful embellishment upon the spirit of the times and the creativity of the times. And that, I think it was accurate, but a lot of the stuff in the movie is not. The documentary is at the library.
Yeah. And how did you get involved with the Tasting of Paris? I mean, it's probably the most important event in Californian wine.
Again, you got to go back in the time machine. There were people that really were making good wine here, and Steven Spurrier and Pat Gallagher heard about it. So they came out and were scouting. They came over and really did their homework research, and they found us. It's not like we volunteered. We were making good wine. They found us. They took it back.
And when you heard about the victory, I mean, what did everybody do?
Well, it was just a regular work day here. We're in the cellar, and this parking lot out here in front of the chateau is pretty rudimentary. It was gravel, and Mike Gergich, our winemaker who crafted that wine, our boss, who was my dad's winemaker, he's Croatian. He's dancing a jig out here, woo, 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 hooting and yelling. So, you know, we're all the cellar guys. We just think Gergitz has gone around the bend.